Welcome back. This is Victoria from Women's Issues, Women's Voices. You are listening to 89.5 KOPN. It's not just radio, it's community radio. And today we are talking. The wonderful thing about community radio is that it's not just about the community of Columbia. Today, our community spreads all the way out to our friends in Sweden. And the reality is that everyone on the planet, right, at some point experiences the dark time. This is reality. This is, if you didn't hear the first part, just knowing that the way that the planets work, that there is always going to be a time somewhere on this planet where your days are short and your nights are long. And I feel like that is a metaphor for life, right? That there are days in each of our lives where the light is short and the darkness is long. And one of the things that prompted this interview and has prompted me on my own personal journey of starting to do dark moon rituals, it was a sentence that I saw in an article, and it was talking about how how they watch the words that are used, like, and they can chart like when certain words have been more popular and less popular. And in the last 10 years, this phrase love and light has increased dramatically. That's what people are focusing on. They're focusing on full moon, they're focusing on the light in the world, and that can actually get out of balance. And I mean, I saw that during the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, like people who were trying, that were wearing themselves out, trying to be like keeping a happy face, keeping self-care, right? And they were actually depleting, they were burning themselves out. And I feel like this is the segue I'd like to take into darkness, right? Samantha, you haven't talked for a little bit. So I'm
Yeah,
I'm gonna kind of cue you up of, so this
sure.
idea like that
So,
Feeney talked about, like that we see the dark as bad, and yet that is not the case.
no, really, it isn't. So, in traditional pagan, traditional Wicca specifically, as that is my background, and you see this in several different cultures, but as the year starts to wane, we call that the actual dark time of the year. So we have a total of 8 holidays, and the last four, from about Mabon, which is the the first major holiday of the dark time, to Samhain, which was just in October. And that's Samhain is where we go into the cauldron. We
Mm-hmm.
go into the dark. We are embraced by the dark. And the thing is that it's a time where we honor death and we honor our ancestors. And really, as we move into Yule, we're still in the center of the dark time. The light is going to start returning. That's why we celebrate Yule. But really, Yule is about this dark time and this time of reflection. The dark time is about going into yourself. It's about meditation. It's about preparing yourself for this next cycle. So it's not like you might hear about some scary dark time monsters of this year, but really it's not about the monsters at all. It's about taking care of yourself in this
Mm-hmm.
way and taking care of your community in this way. You cannot always keep going. This time
Mm-hmm.
of year, let go of them so that they can hibernate and gather energy. And this time, like, so we have what we call the dark mother in a lot of cultures. But the dark mother, she is, it's the person, it's the person you go to when you're grieving. It
Mm-hmm.
is the crone. You go to her, and this year has had so much grief. And really, the dark time is a time to process grief. It is a time to process all of these other emotions that you might be feeling, including anger. I know there's a lot of that right now. There's a lot of grief. There's a lot of frustration and sadness. And that is what this time is for. And just because they're not the ideal finger quotes, because it's this is a very real part of being humanity. And if we don't actually experience this part of our humanity and embrace it and recognize it as this is okay to feel and express, then we are out of balance and it causes other issues within ourselves.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I
yeah, the
feel
Dark
like
Mother, she's who you go to when you need a good cry.
right. And that's,
Yeah.
and that's, I've actually been playing with. So if the sentence is love and light, then in my approach to things, then the other side of that is fear and dark. And that, like, letting yourself sit with your fears, be comforted, not diving into your fears, but letting yourself be supported in the dark. Right.
I
That's
see it more of a time of rest than anything else. Love and light is, I don't see it as fear. I don't think that the opposite of love is fear necessarily. I
well,
think
that's
that
what
the
I've been
opposite of,
trying to find, is that word of, like, what are we saying when we're going, like, if it's love, if it's all about love and light, then when we're inviting people to slow down and let themselves be in the dark, right? We're
it's
really,
about
yeah.
self-reflection and rest.
Phoenix, you just
That's
raised your hands. I saw that.
was just, when hearing you all talk about this, I just kept coming back to love and dark. I mean, it's still love. I mean, why does it have to be the opposite? Even though light and dark are opposite, I feel like it's half of the same thing. So
Yeah.
it's just my 2 cents.
Yeah.
two sides
Okay.
of the same coin. I agree.
Okay, that's, right. That makes perfect sense. I don't know why I didn't think of that. So Kristina, I see you wiggle. So you, I mean, you're there immersed in the dark even more, right? And I've shared with you about my recovery process around anxiety, and and how to be in the dark with, and maybe that's why I think about fear, because to me anxieties are just dysfunctional fears, right? It's when I can't actually just sit in love in the dark with those fears, that they become the anxiety, right? And so when you told me how much darkness that you're having, I mean, I think I told you the first time you told me that, like, my body flushed. I actually was like, oh, like I couldn't catch my breath. It was almost like being immersed into water, like unexpectedly. So what is the darkness for you, who lives there in a place on the planet where, like, you have a lot of dark in a different culture than we live in?
Yeah. Well, for me, rest is a good word. I agree with
Rest.
Samantha. And yeah, a lot of rest. And just recently, the last 2 weeks, I haven't experienced probably corona. And my partner also, he has corona. When you tested him, my test went positive, but it was a bad test. So I guess I had it, but we have very mild symptoms. But what we have been doing, yeah, it's been fine. I'm so much more happy now when this has passed, because I have been so afraid. I've been afraid of dying from this disease. And we had mild symptoms. We have rested and been very careful to take care of ourselves when we are tired. We weren't sick the worst at the same time, so we could take care of each other, and it was so nice. But we have rested, and it's been dark, and when you're sick, you don't want a lot of light, you want the darkness to rest your eyes. So it has been a good experience.
So Kristina, you brought up, I think, like maybe the word that I hadn't even realized is the elephant in the room. Right? Darkness is about death. Right? Darkness is and we in America live in a culture that's supposed to be about, youth and like life in a way that's very light driven, but not understanding what Phoennix talked about earlier, that there's like none of us really knows what happens when we die, right? But if we look at nature, nothing ever truly dies. It's transformed.
Exactly.
It's transformed. It's something goes into the darkness and we do come out different. Whatever goes into the darkness comes out changed. Right? Yeah.
Well, what I think about that is that is pieces from Christianity, that the darkness is something bad. Yeah.
Right.
Because with all our goddesses and gods here and all traditions, the darkness is this dynamic that without the dark and the light, and it makes something happen when someone makes something to make it happen. It's also the same with if you watch theater. If everybody's just happy, nothing happens. It's not interesting to watch. So you need this dynamic.
Yes.
That's what makes things going. You have this. And with all, there is something interesting to check out that I found, that was the theodicy problem within Christianity. That you have an almighty God that is all good, but if someone is all good, how can there be pain? So they have to create hell, they have to create Satan, they have to create their way, the only way. This is because people choose the dark. That is why we have pain, and we're born from sin and all that. But with other religions that don't have this, the almighty God, that have just lots of gods or forces or nature, being close to nature, they don't have this problem. So when I read about this, it was a big revelation, because this has been a big question for me since I was a teenager. I have tried to get in understanding Christianity, because that would be so nice to be part of a nice church. But I cannot. The more I go into it, I cannot believe that. So I become more and more pagan and learn more about this instead.
So what you were just saying, what you just said, Chris,
dark. Yeah.
What you just said made me think about in my studies of movement, we talk about that balance, that so many people think that balance is like a state and then you hold it, right? Like I'm in balance. And actually, as soon as you start holding it, you're not in balance anymore, right? Balance is this it's the word you use, dynamic, this dynamic. And if you watch the YouTube video, folks, you'll see what you don't hear on the radio, which is, Phoennix and I are both like back and forth, right? Like that it's this dynamic, and that if something gets too far one direction, then things have to move, right? They have to move back until they get too far the other direction. And that nature's not really seeking the middle. Nature's always seeking balance, which is constantly moving. Yeah.
Balance is a pendulum.
Yeah. And so, I think that the four of us are coming to this, having the second part of this, embracing the dark, like is our invitation to anyone who's listening to this, right? To embrace a word that I've really been exploring because of some of the work that I'm doing is decolonizing, right? Is realizing that inner inner resistance to sitting in the dark, to allowing yourself to enjoy the dark, is actually part of our colonization, right? That it's like been taught to us, right? And that's what, Kristina, you're saying, like, not so much for you, right? That very early you were already seeing it as a dynamic, not as something to resist. That darkness has not been something for you to resist. It's just been part of the process. But for those of us in the States, and I think that's a little bit of that consumer, right? The capitalistic like drive to always be in the light, always be happy, right? Like, oh, right. And recognizing that I just saw a great definition of self-care. Self-care is not accumulating any new pain. I thought that was such an interesting way that it actually says, then self-care can be just maintaining. You may have lots of pains in your life, right? But if you're maintaining it and then not taking on, not absorbing, accumulating new pain, you're actually doing self-care. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting perspective. And I think it has something to do with this. Like, it's this. So that first part, embracing the dark. So if you're listening to this and that sounds like a challenge, that's what we're inviting you to do. And embracing doesn't mean wrapping your arms around and doing it 110%, because then that in itself is sort of the consumer, right? Do it all, right? We're talking about small nibbles, right? Yeah, Kristina?
Yeah, I think it's important to not be, you don't have to be alone in the darkness. For me, when I'm experience hard feelings, I need to try to reach out to others, or try to find the goddess or God on my side, or maybe something I did when I was a child, maybe a soft pet or something. And when nothing of that works, and I can get fierce, and I suffer from PTSD, and that's really hard to get flashbacks, and I cannot even move because my body freezes, and that's so scary. But the thing is that I know that this pass. The body isn't gonna freeze forever, and the flashback isn't gonna keep on doing forever. It's gonna pass. But I realized that when I dare to look at the things that I'm afraid of, and to really face it, to really see ask the fear or the deep feeling or the shame or whatever, what do you want to tell me? It can be important things that once the rises in me, that want to be acknowledged and seen, and then when I've done this, I can move forward. So
Yes.
I think that's what they call shadow work.
Yes.
It's so important to do it.
Yeah.
And only the bravest one can do this work. So to actually feel mental health, no, I mean not mental health, mental, what do you say, disability? I mean, that takes so much courage. I mean, if you cannot feel this, what do? You have to go into some kind of addiction on some, for example, work addiction. You get busy all the time, so you don't feel. But the more you have possibility to feel, and when it's too much, turn to someone or something or you don't have to carry it alone. And we are part of something bigger than ourselves, and it's so important.
Thank you so much. Oh, Samantha, we lost your picture, but we're going to keep going. So we have about 5 minutes. Yeah, Phoennix.
I just, am I on? I am on. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry. I was not on for a second.
My dog barks. So, I kind of wanted to tag on to what was just said. an example of what Kristina was just talking about. You know, my husband and I over many years have had discussions about, we call them demons, you know, the demons that you fight, which is, you know, kind of like your dark, going into doing that shadow work that Kristina was talking about. And, you know, and I did a lot of that when I was much younger, in my kind of early mid 20s. I did a whole lot of that, resolving some things that had happened earlier in my life. And you know, every now and then over the years, he said, well, you've learned how to deal with your demons. You know, your demons are gone. And I was like, well, no, they're sitting right beside me every minute of every single day. Sometimes they get larger and we have big discussions, and they make themselves very known, and, you know, and we dance. And sometimes it goes well, sometimes it does not go well. And that goes back into that balance that you were talking about. And I think that what Kristina had said was very important, about sitting alone. You don't have to be alone. It's good to be able to sit alone, but it's also good to know when you can't do it alone anymore, and you reach out to your God or your goddess or your muse or your partner or your community or your therapist or whatever it is. Reach out to it, and by God's, hold on to it and grab it and hug it and ask for it, because that's the only way that we work out of the darkness, and learn how to sit there and feel strong and feel safe and feel comforted and feel the reward of being in the dark, and feel the stillness as like a weighted blanket, as opposed to you know, something thorny and uncomfortable.
Yeah. So Samantha, we have 2.5 minutes. So can you take us out on this topic? Yeah, can you just take us out? Because this is actually where I was going, is like, so the other part of this interview is about the journey of balance. And that's, I feel like Kristina started us, Phoennix just, right? So this journey.
As a bipolar person, this emphasis, my existence is a pendulum. I swing from a high, like everything, I have all this energy, to lows where I have no energy at all. So this pendulum is an experience, and I'm on medication, and it helps me create what's called the Goldilocks zone, but I still experience this oscillation in mood. And right now I'm actually in a low, which is appropriate for this time of year. A lot of people experience lows at this time. Holidays experience depressions and seasonal affective disorder. And one of the things that a lot of people talk about so much is self-care. And you can only take care of yourself for so long. The opposite of these depressions and these sadnesses, and you know, you feel the dark. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes you feel like you're drowning in it, and that's okay. What the opposite of that is community care. You don't, if you can't take care of yourself, if you are constantly trying to express love and light, if you are constantly in this struggle of, if you're struggling with the darkness, if you go, wait, I'm here, I'm present. What depression and anxiety do to you is prevent you from living in the present. And when you want to be really present, it's much easier to be in the present when you're with someone. And it doesn't mean that, and with COVID right now, this need of being present, this need of being with others, I think that's one of the reasons that families are really coming together during this time, like in their own individual households. I mean, we've seen Christmas trees shortages because people are purchasing these things to come together in their own space. My housemate and I put up our tree together. We've lived together for 4 years, and this is the first time that he has participated in putting up the tree.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's about coming together in that darkness.
Yeah.
Yule isn't just about celebrating the light, but it's celebrating the community that you have to help you get through the rest of this dark time.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
still have one more holiday to get to before the light returns, and that's in
Yeah.
bulk. And
Yes.
January sucks. Like January is when it's the coldest and the darkest, and even into February, miserable.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
during these miserable times, during these hard times, and this year has been an unbelievably difficult year for everyone. It is time to really come together and reject the capitalistic side. It is a time to come together and recognize that the opposite of this consumerism is coming together as a community and
Yeah.
finding our support within each other, and really
Yes.
finding ways to provide that. I think, and that goes to a pagan perspective as well. It's
Yeah.
about the community. It's about getting together, and finding that rest in each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that, that's a great place to wrap up. So this is Women's Issues, Women's Voices. You are listening to 89.5 KOPN Columbia. It's not just radio, it's community radio.